Subu Shankar, age 14 years, said the sheet of paper. It was a doctor's prescription. It wasn't the first sheet of paper that had tormented me during my life up until then. And yet, this is the one that still stands out in my memory. I had just been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder and been prescribed medication to treat it. The psychiatrist seemed to have convinced my folks that the drugs would help me get back on track as far as my studies and exams were concerned. I used to be a great student actually, top of the class, acing debates and elocution competitions. And now I was going cold, with the exam paper in front of me, feeling like it was miles away from me. Soon, clomipramine and fluoxetine became my buddies that I used to carry everywhere with me. Clomipramine technically was to treat OCD, and fluoxetine, otherwise known as Prozac, was another antidepressant to go with it. Now, obsessive compulsive disorder, as a lot of us might be knowing, is a psychological condition where a person feels some kind of fear or nervous tension around a particular thing that they keep obsessing about. And they feel the need to do something to try to relieve that tension, and it's compulsive. And the most popular form of OCD we may have heard of is the one relating to hygiene, where there's fear of germs and contamination, that kind of thing, where the person keeps washing and cleaning over and over again. Now, my obsessive compulsive pattern of behavior was centered on studies, more or less. There were other elements, but this was the dominant pattern. I would keep reading and rereading, checking and rechecking, to see if I've left something important out, either while preparing for an exam or while answering questions in a test. Needless to say, this drained a lot of my time and energy and was very stressful. I would try to hide my obsessions, and this made me self-conscious and anxious in social situations. Now it was all a little confusing for me. How could something that I was so good at suddenly become my source of fear and anxiety? I'm sure these concerns weighed on everyone around me, including my parents, but time was ticking. After all, my dad had plans to send me away to the Ivy League in the US for further studies. So there really was no time to get into details here. The train of my future had derailed and needed to be got back on track immediately, no questions asked. I was a deer in the headlights. And if I look now at some of my pictures from back then, I'm staring into the camera quite like one. Well, there was one central question that I'd keep asking over and over again. Why me? Not that I wished this on anyone else, but how did I get so unlucky? Soon, I was struggling and scrambling my way through my graduation on an extremely high dose of meds. I was studying for my BA in English literature. Yes, I was an art student. Now, studying arts was quite a shift from the initial plans that had been laid out for me. I was supposed to study engineering or medicine, given my academic proficiency, and not in the least my nerdy Tamram family background. But here I was doing a BA. Arts is for Buddhus, I remember a school maths teacher dismissively saying when she heard about it. Girls study arts, chimed in an old uncle. But I was glad to be studying arts, and literature at that. All the literary classics, texts, and poetry in my course truly opened me up to so many aspects of the human experience. Literature opened me up to psychology, philosophy, spirituality, metaphysics, and existentialism. That shit I could relate to back then. My favorite poet was Sylvia Plath, who was the dark muse who even inspired me to write some morbid poetry of my own. And so my mind soaked in the beauty and intensity of the texts, and the seeds of my future career in writing and editing were probably sowed during that time. But the exhilaration of the texts and the moving beauty of great writing didn't always reflect in the way I approached my exams. Often, I would struggle with pacing myself during a test, ending up focusing and obsessing too much on one question, leaving little or no time for the rest of the paper. The meds may have toned down my anxiety a bit, but they were beginning to change me. I soon began to experience sleepiness, exhaustion, a sense of indifference, serious lows in mood. I quite remember being emotionally overwhelmed before I was put on the pills, but the onset of depressive behavior was quite after I was prescribed the medication. I soon began to see psychotherapists to help me deal with the situation. It took me a few years to find the right kind of therapist to whom I could open up and whose counsel brought on a shift in perspective. But the meds were on. In the meantime, I had a falling out with my psychiatrist, the doctor who had prescribed the pills, because I felt he wasn't offering much help with weaning me off the medication. And by that time, my dad and I figured that we could pretty much try to do it on our own after all those years. And we did. We did manage to get me off a lot of the dosage over a period of time. But there was still this last minimum dosage that I could not let go of. I would sink into lows and stay away from work and people every time I tried to get off that dose. And how it happened was, often I would have a great run, feeling really upbeat and productive at work. And thinking this was probably the right time to try getting off the medication, I would stop that dose. In a few days, I would struggle to get out of bed and face the day. My mood swings, random bouts of moping, and the lashing out of the people around me seemed to signal that I still needed the medication. And so we kept that dose going for years. And I seemed to settle into some kind of rhythm, some strange balance, but things were going okay. I had my good days and bad, but at least I was back on some kind of track. And then it happened. I was out one night with the woman I was dating, and while we were getting intimate, something inside me just didn't feel right. It felt like a part of me wanted to connect with my partner, but another part was just pulling me away. And as much as I tried to stay in the moment, a sense of indifference came over me and overwhelmed me. In a weird sort of way, it kind of felt like that exam paper in front of me from years ago, and I just had to get out of there. When I got home, I got online to try to figure out what had just happened. You know, nowadays, we can have like half a condition, but you want to get online and Google the crap out of it. And back then I thought there was something serious on, which it was. And when I got online, almost all the websites that I came across seemed to point to one thing in common as a probable cause for what I was feeling, or not feeling. Antidepressants. There, I needed to see that with my own eyes. And right from the next day, I got off that last bit of meds that I was on, cold turkey. Now a month or so passed with no dramas. And then I started having panic attacks. Tingling sensations in my arms and legs soon became burning, prickling needles of pain. My head would often feel like a box that could just burst open from the mounting pressure inside it. I would snap and scream at my folks for the smallest of things, and it got to a point where I had to tell them I had been off the meds for a month. My default state at that time was a half-paranoid condition, where I would rant and rave at my parents, holding them responsible for all the chemical alterations that I had endured in my system for most of my adult years. Everything from my weight gain to my pattern of self-sabotage in career and relationships was attributed to my parents' lack of discretion. They were the ones who got me on the pills, which were the demons that grew within me and devoured my confidence and self-esteem at vital points in my life. Or so I thought, in that state of physical and emotional pain. It felt like an exorcism, really. It was a rough time, to say the least, and at one point I even went to see a psychiatrist again, though a different one this time. She seemed to think I still needed the medication and couldn't offer me a timetable or a plan to try to taper off the dosage. And so I took a script. But just as I stepped out of a clinic, I found myself thinking, this is the longest that I've managed to stay without any medication. I'm simply not going to reverse what has just happened. And so I never got back on the meds. For the next few months, I took things a day at a time. I took a break from work. I basically quit my job. I sought treatment for my nerve pain, along with physiotherapy, to help relieve the soreness and discomfort in my limbs, back and neck that had developed in the aftermath of my taking the drugs and going into nervous shock. I even consulted a homeopath, who's also a counselor, and her treatment too helped me in tiding over the roughest part of this phase. Soon, I began to get calls for freelance projects through ex-colleagues and former bosses. And that was a silver lining for me in that gloomy phase, where a decent amount of work landed on my plate so I didn't have to do the 9-to-5 drill. And that really helped a lot. And even took my mind off a lot of the issues that I was working through. The pain and emotional turmoil soon began to lose their edge. Today, I feel I've come a fair way from that intense and trying phase. The muddled thinking, the need to stay in bed for long hours, and the fear and panic are no longer here. I do have days when the soreness in my back and neck gets a bit much, but I enjoy my work and meeting my friends too much to let these things bog me down. When my mind is absorbed in reading, writing, doing the things that I love, and being with the people that I care about, the physical discomfort can only affect me so much. I keep my appointments today, and I'm no longer the no-show that I once was on holiday trips planned with friends. You know, it's like a big part of me that being dialed down earlier has now been turned right back up. From time to time, I do reflect on the whole experience over the years. Could things have been handled better back in the day? How come no one seemed to offer me enough help to get off the medication? Because surely pills cannot be the long-term solution for obsessive-compulsive behavior. Doctors seem to think I still need medication. Then how am I able to pull on now without any? But what is clear as day, though, is that I have purged those demons from my system. Not just the pills, also the baggage, and that constant feeling of fighting a battle. I do have my bad days, but that doesn't affect my daily routine or even keep me from getting regular exercise. And sure, I check some things a few more times than I probably should. Like, have I switched the heater off? Lock the door properly when I'm leaving home? I even run a little ritual in my car before I shut it down and lock it, and then keep checking it a few times to see if I've done it properly. But nothing too much. Things seem more in flow now. And I really like where I am and who I am now. Unmedicated. Thank you.